The title of the shiur is Yehuda HaMaccabi and Lessons in Faith, Stories from Tanakh. My name, Menachem Gottlieb, is there, and my email address. If anybody would like to write me, please do. If you have any questions, the reason behind the source sheet here is so that you will become educated, you'll have the sources, you'll be able to explain it to others, and you'll be able to challenge me if you think I made any mistakes or there's a problem here. Okay, 410 years for the first temple period, 420 for the second temple period. There were 70 years in between. Okay, now, the second temple period you can break it up into 4 sections, as I wrote here on page 1. 34 years Persian. That was the first 34 years. The next 180 years, the Greeks controlled Eretz Yisrael. Then the Maccabees for 103 years, the Hashmonaim period, and Herod and his sons, 103 years. That's how it breaks up. So we're going to be talking about the Maccabean period right over here, when Yehuda HaMaccabi started his wars, after his father, Matisyahu, killed the Greeks that came to request that he sacrifice a pig on the altar. He refused. And after he killed those people, and the Hellenist Jew that stepped forward that said, I'll sacrifice the pig instead of you, after he was killed, the revolt began, because there was no point in staying around waiting for the Greeks to come in and take revenge. What I want to do now is go through the wars of Yehuda HaMaccabi. Matityahu, the father, he passed away after about a year. And he, on his deathbed, he spoke to his 5 sons. Yehuda, he will be the one to lead the wars because he was the military man, etc. Okay, now we're on section 1, number 1. Matityahu, sons and others fled to the mountains. 6,000 Jews carried out nighttime raids on the Syrian Greeks. That's how many people Yehuda HaMaccabi had at the time, 6,000. And they would have nightly raids. And they were successful. At the beginning, they weren't a big problem for the Syrian Greeks. They didn't look at it, they looked some skirmishes here and there, but it got to a point where they had to deal with the problem. Number 2, Apollonius, commander of Samaria for the Syrian Greeks. He tried in vain to break through to Jerusalem. First open and large-scale battle took place north of Jerusalem. The Maccabees won. 3, third battle. Near Beit Horon, the Maccabees won an even greater victory, slaying many of the enemies. 4, Siron, commander of the Syrian army, comes and attacks Beit Horon. The Maccabees attack, killing 800 of the enemy soldiers, thoroughly routing them. You have to understand the Maccabees, they were very spiritual, religious people. They would go into their battles fasting as a spiritual service to Hashem, to show that everything relied on Hashem. They would obviously pray before their battles, and after their battles, they would thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for saving them. Number 5, Antiochus appoints his relative, Lysias, who sends his 3 most ablest generals, Ptolemy, Nicanor, Georgius, to lead the Judean campaign with 40,000 foot soldiers and 7,000 cavalry against Yehuda's 4,000 men. In a surprise attack, the Maccabees killed 3,000 of the enemy and the rest fled. Before that battle, they went to the tomb of Shmuel Hanavi and they prayed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu before the battle. They brought their bikurim and sacrificed. They say, Hashem, we can't sacrifice, we don't have a temple. We can't get to the temple. Please accept what we have, our first fruits, etc., etc. And they had Nazirs who had a Nazir who makes an oath not to cut his hair for 30 days. Afterwards, he has to bring a sacrifice. So the same thing. These Nazirs, they can't They can't get to the temple. HaKadosh Baruch Hu miraculously helped them. 6. A year later, Lysias sends a force of 60,000 infantry and 5,000 cavalry against 10,000 Maccabees. Yehuda's force kills 5,000 soldiers and the rest despaired and left. I'm not giving you all the details of the war. I'm just summarizing it for you to give you an idea. All this happened in the first 3 years. Every time the Greeks would lose, then they would send a larger force and then a larger force. And each one was a tremendous miracle. Then in the 3rd year of the revolt, they were able to get to the temple and they rededicated the temple. They found the flasks of oil, etc. After they rededicated the temple, they had problems because the Gentiles in different parts of Eretz Yisrael were slaughtering Jews in revenge. Yehuda HaMaccabi had to go and send out his forces to defend those Jews. Number 7, Gentiles began killing Jews throughout Israel, and Yehuda dispatches 3,000 men to the Galilee under his brother Shimon and 8,000 to Gilead under the command of himself and his brother Jonathan. The rest of the forces he left in Jerusalem to protect Yerushalayim. 8. Lysias, now the head of Syrian Greeks, he organized 100,000 foot soldiers, 20,000 cavalry, and many elephants to wage war at the behest of the Hellenists from Accra. The Hellenists, they're the ones who invited them in. Please help us, because the Maccabees didn't make it easy for the Hellenists, right? The Hellenists didn't want to have anything to do with Judaism, and they wanted to bring in Greek culture into the country. They asked Lysias, please help us. So this is what happened. This is the battle that one of the brothers, Eleazar, rushed to stab the leading elephant, expecting to kill the new king Antiochus V, and he got the wrong elephant. And he died under the weight of the elephant. After the Syrian victory at Beit Sur and Beit Zechariah, Lysias laid siege to Mount Sion. They surrounded Mount Sion, and what happened, Baruch Hashem, miraculously, they weren't able to stay there. What was the problem? It was the Shemitah year, and they were very hungry. There was no food in the fields, because in those days, the Maccabees, they took it very seriously. They didn't sell the land to a goy and then try to work the land or anything. They didn't work the land. The Torah says not to work the land. They didn't work the land. So this turned out to be a big blessing for them, because Lysias and his army of 100,000 couldn't survive too much longer because there was no food. The other thing Lysias had a problem is there was a rebellion going on back home, and he needed to leave to get back home. So he knew this siege was going to take a long time. He said, okay, let's make a deal with these Jews. We'll let them keep their religion. They can do whatever they want. That's probably why they're rebelling in the first place. And we'll just call it a truce. And that's what they did. And Lysias left. The Jewish people made a holiday out of it. And that was the 28th of Shvat, was a holiday during the Second Temple period. Lysias did betray them a little bit, because when he got into Jerusalem, he saw all the fortifications and he had them all knocked down before he left. Number 9 was another holiday. What happened after Lysias made this peace treaty? A few months later, he was killed by Demetrius. I'll read it. 9. Demetrius kills Lysias, and the peace treaty reached a few months prior with Yehuda HaMaccabi was now null and void. Demetrius sends Nicanor with 35,000 to attack Yehuda. Yehuda had only 3,000. Nicanor and his entire army were killed. The sages declared the 13th of Adar a festival. They cut off Nicanor's hands and feet, and they hanged them at the walls of Yerushalayim, and they made it into a holiday because another war they won. They had a holiday also because they were able to overpower the Hellenists, and they were able to kill them. They had another holiday. The Hanukkah was another holiday. The reason that Hanukkah is the only holiday that survived, really the truth is, after the temple period was over, unfortunately we lost the temple and the Jews were exiled, all the holidays were no longer celebrated except for Hanukkah. The Gemara says, why Hanukkah? And the answer is because the Jewish people became so attached to Hanukkah with the lighting of the candles, etc., that it was too traumatic to give that holiday up. And that's why Hanukkah is still celebrated, because after the temple was destroyed, you would think, what are we celebrating, right? But that's the answer. The book of the Maccabees say, why is there 8 days of Hanukkah? And the answer, the book of the Maccabees says, is not because of the lights, but because the Maccabees were so upset that they couldn't celebrate Sukkot because of the wars, that as soon as they had tranquility, they decided this holiday we're going to make 8 days to celebrate the holiday of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret. The Gemara emphasizes the miracle of the oil. The book of the Maccabees doesn't even mention it. And see, if you live through miracles all the time, that is not such a big deal. If you're fighting wars, and every second is a miracle that you come out alive. With the swords flying everywhere. You know how they used to fight wars? Okay. And they would go in with 5,000 against 50,000. Everything was such a miracle. The fact that the oil lasted a little longer is no big deal, because the whole thing was miraculous. So for them, it's not even anything to talk about. So in their minds, I don't think it was a big deal. At this point in the game, so to speak, the suggestion is raised, maybe we should go to Rome. Let's try to make a deal with Rome. Rome was a world power. Their enemy was the Greeks. Maybe the Jews can make an alliance with Rome, because it's never ending. Once we win a battle, the next battle comes. And the Greeks, they're very big power, and they just keep sending more and more forces, and it's it's just overwhelming. So the suggestion is, do we go to Rome? Make a pact with Rome? We'll be your ally, you be our ally. You will come to your defense, you come to our defense. What do you think?
No, bad idea.
Horrible idea. Prayer ends at that point.
Who thinks it's a good idea?
Well, we have the hindsight on our side.
You could say, listen, but you understand why they consider it, and they actually did it. Yehuda HaMaccabi sent 2 members to the Senate in Rome to make a treaty with Rome. We'll come to your aid, you come to our aid, etc. That was the deal. Yehuda HaMaccabi was already gaining fame. He was winning big battles against the Greeks. So here's Yehuda HaMaccabi saying, we'll help you. So the Rome says, okay. Let's turn to page 10, source 19, the treaty with Rome. May all go well with the Romans and with the nation of the Jews at sea and on land forever, and may sword and enemy be far from them. If war comes first to Rome or to any of their allies in all their dominion, the nations of the Jews shall act as their allies wholeheartedly, as the occasion may indicate to them. To the enemy that makes war, they shall not give or supply grains, arms, money, or ships, just as Rome has decided. And they shall keep their obligations without receiving any in return. In the same way, if war comes first to the nation of the Jews, the Romans shall act as their allies, as the occasion may indicate to them. And to their enemies there shall not be given grain, arms, money, or ships, just as Rome has decided, and they shall keep these obligations and do so without deceit. Thus, on these terms, the Romans make a treaty with the Jewish people. If after these terms are in effect, both parties shall determine to add or delete anything, they shall do so at their discretion. And any addition or deletion that may make shall be valid. Means if both sides agree to change the terms, they can do it. Concerning the wrongs that King Demetrius has done to them, we have written to him as follows. Why have you made your yoke heavy on our friends and allies, the Jews? If now they appeal again for help against you, we will defend their rights and fight you on sea and on land. So you can see the Jewish people, maybe they were happy with this. Finally, we have a big ally on our side. The problem was, the next war, Rome doesn't show up. And Yehuda HaMaccabi is killed in that war, and it's the first war that Yehuda HaMaccabi loses. And that's number 20. Yehuda made a treaty with Rome. The pact with Rome proved to be of no value. Several months after Demetrius sent an even larger army led by Bacchidus and Alchemists against Jerusalem, but no Roman help was forthcoming. Yehuda's men, upon seeing the mighty army of the enemy, lost heart and deserted him. He was left with only 800 men. Yehuda refused to flee and went forth in battle. Many fell on both sides, but when Yehuda was killed, the remnants of his force fled the fray. Yonatan and Shimon carried their brother to Modi'in for burial. All Israel mourned for him for a long time. Woe for the hero of battle has fallen, the strength of Israel and its protector. Every other time, Yehuda was able to rally the troops. All of a sudden, his charisma was gone. And the people became afraid. His soldiers became afraid, where before they weren't afraid. And he was able to encourage them, etc. The theory that I'm going to propose tonight is that perhaps he lost because of this treaty with Rome. Let's look at some of the sources. Now we're on page 3. There's a commandment in the Torah that you're not allowed to make a covenant with the non-Jews. You're not allowed to be allies with the non-Jews. Now, there's 3 times it mentions it in the Torah. Now, when it mentions it in context of the 7 nations. But Chazal tell us that it applies to any non-Jew. And that's the Rambam brings that down as halacha. And we'll go through that now. Number 1, in Devarim. When Hashem your God will bring you to the land to which you come to possess it, and many nations will be thrust away from before you, the Hittite, the Girgashite, the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivavite, and the Jebusite, 7 nations greater and mightier than you. And Hashem your God will deliver them before you, and you will smite them. You shall utterly destroy them. And this is, here it is on the underlined. You shall not seal a covenant with them. You shall not show them favor. You shall, number 3, you shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughter to his son, and you shall not take his daughter for your son. And why? Number 4, for he will cause your child to turn away from after me, and they will worship the gods of others. Then Hashem's wrath will burn against you, and he will destroy you quickly. Our most important commodity that we have is our relationship with Hashem. Anyone or any person who interferes with that relationship is very dangerous for the Jewish people, because that is our source of life. Hashem is warning us, don't make any covenants with them. If they are people who don't worship me, worship Hashem, don't make any deals with them. Don't show them compassion. Don't intermarry with them. Number 2. Now we're on source 2. Again, we see in the Torah a similar idea. Verse 31. And I shall set your border from the sea of reeds to the sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness until the river, for I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hands, and you shall drive them away from before you. 32. Thou shalt not seal a covenant with them or their gods. 33. They shall not dwell in your land. This is the commandment in the Torah that non-Jews who do not worship Hashem are not allowed to live in the land. Lest they cause you to sin against me, and that you will worship their gods, which will be a snare for you. We can't have people in the country who do not worship Hashem. They are a snare for the Jewish people. What happens, just by being in our midst, they influence people. Maybe they're not going to influence you, right? But they're going to influence people who are not as connected to Hashem, and therefore it's dangerous. Source 3. We're in Exodus chapter 34, verse 11. Keep carefully what I am commanding you today. Lo, I will drive out from before you the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. Next page, sentence 12. And here it is. Beware lest you form a covenant with the inhabitants of the land into which you are coming, lest it become a snare in your midst. Now, again, all these in context are talking about the 7 nations. We have the Mechilta by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. He's a Tana. He explains that no, we're not talking just about the 7 nations. We're talking about anyone who's involved in foreign worship. And that's what we see in 4a. 4a is the Mechilta of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. I'll read it in English. Beware lest you form a covenant with the inhabitants of the land. This is a warning of a negative prohibition not to make a covenant with those involved in foreign worship. For their altars you should smash. It is a positive commandment to destroy idolatry and all the things that serve idolatry and all that is done on its behalf. That's Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai explaining the mitzvah in the Torah. And the Rambam paskins that as halacha. As we see in Hilchot Avodah Zarah Perek Yud, we're on source 5, halacha 1. We may not draw up a covenant with those engaged in foreign worship, which will establish peace between them and us, and yet allow them to worship as it states. Do not establish a covenant with them. Rather, they must renounce their foreign worship or be slain. It is forbidden to have mercy upon them. As it states, do not show them favor. So here the Rambam explains, why can't you make an alliance with Rome? Because we're not allowed to protect them. We're not allowed to keep them going when they are not worshiping the true God. Our God, the God of Israel, says you cannot be in alliance with them because you cannot guarantee their life. The story of King Asa. Now this is an interesting story because it relates a little bit to Yehuda HaMaccabi. Let's see. Now Asa started out as a very good king. He was a king of Judea, and he commanded Judah to seek the Lord, the God of their forefathers, and to perform the law and the commandments. And he removed from all the cities of Judah the high places and the sun images, and the kingdom was tranquil before him. So first thing, he was a good king. What did he do? First thing, he gets rid of all the foreign worship in the country. Zerach, the Cushite, came out against them with an army of 1,000,000 people and 300 chariots, and he came as far as Marashah. Now Asa had 580,000 troops. Zerach, the Cushite, he had 1,000,000, almost double, and 300 chariots. Number 9, and Asa came out before him, and they set the battle in array in the valley of Zephath at Marashah. 10, and Asa called out to the Lord his God, and he said, O Lord, there is no difference to you to help either the great or the powerless. Help us, O Lord our God, for we have relied on you, and we have come with your name upon this multitude. You are the Lord our God, let no man rule against you. So Asa now is praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for help. 11, and the Lord smote the Cushites before Asa and before Judah, and the Cushites fled. 12, and Asa and the people who were with him pursued them all the way to Gerar, and there fell from the Cushites until they had no life. For they were broken before the Lord, before his camp, and they carried away very much spoils. 1,000,000 people. And 13, and they smote all the cities around Gerar because the fear of the Lord was upon them, and they plundered all the cities because there was much plunder in them. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to reunite the kingdom. Shlomo HaMelech was one of the wisest of all men. He became king when he was 12 years old. First thing he started to do was make alliances. He married the daughter of Paro, and she is known in the Tanakh as Bat Paro. Why? Because her name is not important. The fact that she is the daughter of Paro, that was what's important. Egypt was a major power, and he married her when he was 16, 4 years later. He ruled for a total of 40 years. So he was married to Bat Paro for 36 years. He had an alliance. He had an alliance also with many, many countries. He married 700 women. What he would do, in those days, if you wanted a peace treaty, you would marry the daughter of the king. That way the king wouldn't attack your country because his daughter lived in the palace. That's how they made peace treaties. And he made an alliance with so many countries. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wasn't happy with this alliance. First of all, you're not allowed to make a pact, as we read. And number two, you're asking them for help. Because of that, his kingdom was split. You made alliances in order to keep your kingdom together, right? In order to be strong. So what does Hashem do? He's going to break your kingdom apart. When he died, when Shlomo died, the kingdom divided into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, which was called Judea. And the northern kingdom was called Israel. Since the decree was only for 36 years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to reunite the kingdom after 36 years. But Asa, who till now was a great king, as we read, he continued to act like Shlomo and tried to make political alliances, and that because of that he wasn't worthy to bring and unify the kingdom together. But how does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want to unify the kingdom? He wants to create tension between the two so that a war will break out. Then when the war breaks out, the king over here, who's Asa, he will go to war and get all the territory back. That was the plan. So let's read the story. Okay, we're on source 7, page 6. Divrei Hayamim Bet, chapter 16. In the 36th year of Asa's kingdom, Baasha, the king of Israel, advanced on Judea and built the Ramah, so as not to allow anyone either to leave or enter to Asa, king of Judea. The Hebrew name was Baasha. He's the king of Israel. This is the king of Judea. They're not friends. Baasha, what he does, he built a tower. Anyone who would come in and out of Yerushalayim, they would throw stones on, boulders on them, and it's like a blockade, an economic blockade. Well, Asa can't stand that, so he needs to deal with this problem. So what does he do? Instead of going to war against Baasha, he goes to Aram. Aram had a peace treaty with Baasha. So what does Asa do? He takes the money from the temple, the silver and the gold from the temple. He sends it to Ben-Hadad. He says, listen, I'll give you a bribe. I want you to break your alliance with Baasha for the money. And don't be his friends, but attack him. And when you attack him, then he'll leave me alone because he'll be bothered with you. That's not what Hashem wanted. Hashem wanted him, Asa, to go to war against all of them and capture all the territory, reunify the kingdom. Just like in the 6-day war, what did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He created a lot of tension in the Middle East to the point where Israel had to go to war to capture more territory because God wanted to give Yerushalayim back to the Jewish people and Judea and Samaria, and he orchestrated this whole thing. And fortunately, we went to war and we captured it all. God wanted to return it to us. That's the same thing that happened here, except it didn't have a happy ending. Okay, let's look. Now we're on verse 2. And Asa brought out silver and gold from the treasuries of the house of the Lord and the house of the king, and he sent to Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, who dwelt in Damascus, saying, there is a treaty between me and you, and between my father and your father. Behold, I have sent you silver and gold. Go abrogate your treaty with Baasha, the king of Israel, that he may depart from me. Break the treaty here with this guy. We're friends now. Don't be friends with Baasha. 4. And Ben-Hadad heeded King Asa, and he sent the officers of his army to the cities of Israel, and they smote Ijon and Dan and Abel-maim and all the storehouses of the city of Naphtali. Now it came to pass, when Baasha heard that, he stopped building the Ramah, and he discontinued his work. So it worked. You have to understand, it worked, right? Asa probably was very proud of himself. He didn't have to go to war. He didn't have to lose any soldiers, right? Pikuach nefesh. He gave the money to Aram. Aram taxed him. Everything was fine. 6. And King Asa took all of Judah, and they carried away the stones of the Ramah and its wood, which Baasha had built, and with them he built Geba and Mitzpah. Now the prophet comes to Asa and says, you did a bad thing. Number 7. And this prophet is called Hanani Haroeh, Hanani the seer. Hanani is one of the 48 prophets in Tanakh. The only time he's mentioned is right here. This is his claim to fame. 7. And at that time, Hanani the seer came to Asa, king of Judah, and he said to him, when you relied on the king of Aram, and you did not rely on the Lord your God, therefore the army of the king of Aram escaped from your hand. Aram escaped from your hand, and of course Baasha escaped from your hand, and Hashem wanted to reunite the kingdom. And you didn't, because you didn't want to go to war, and you wanted to rely on your own sechel by taking the money from the temple, God's money, and sending it to him. You did a bad thing. Okay, let's see, 8. And then he says to him, the prophet says to Asa, the top of the page, were not the Cushites and the Lubim a huge host with very many chariots and horsemen? But when you relied on the Lord, he delivered them into your hand. Didn't you see miracles already in your life? Right? You were outnumbered, a 1,000,000-man army, and Hashem came to help you. So what are you afraid of? 9. For the Lord, his eyes run to and fro throughout the entire earth to grant strength with those whose heart is whole towards him. You have dealt foolishly in this matter. For now on you shall have wars. You thought you were going to get away from wars. Now you're going to be punished with wars. And how do you think Asa took this? Number 10. And Asa was incensed against the seer, and he put him into prison house, for he was wroth with him about this, and Asa crushed some of the people at the time. And all of his friends who were siding with the prophet were not in good favor. 11. And behold, the deeds of Asa, the first and the last, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. And Asa suffered from a foot ailment in the 39th year of his reign, until his ailment spread upwards, and also in his illness he did not seek the Lord, but physicians. He became stubborn. He didn't want to rely on Hashem. And even when he was sick, he didn't want to rely on Hashem, didn't want to pray to God. He just relied on the physicians, and he died. 13, and Asa slept with his forefathers, and he died in the 41st year of his reign. The Radak says the reason he said the reason he was punishing his legs is because he didn't want to take his legs and go to war. Okay, so what do we see here from this? We see number 1 is Asa experienced miracles. So he's in a different category. Just like Yehuda HaMaccabi, who experienced all these miracles, does he have to rely really on Rome? If you really believe, what are you going to Rome for? War after war after war. HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes through for you. Is it real for you? When you go to Rome, you're acting like it wasn't real. Maybe my luck is running out. That was what was going on here. If you really believe in God, what are you going to Rome for? Those idol worshippers, to protect you? I'm protecting you, Hashem says. Source 8, and I will for this afflict the seed of David, but not forever. Because the way Shlomo behaved with all these political alliances, and that caused him to worship, or at least allow foreign worship in the country by his wives. So God says, I'm going to afflict the seed of David, but not forever. So Rashi explains, what does that mean for not forever? So it's the two answers. The first answer, but not for all times. For in the days of the Mashiach, the kingdom will be restored to him, back to the line of David. And the second answer, in Seder Olam, I found, this is what I explained to you before, I shall afflict David's descendants because of this, corresponding to the 36 years that Solomon was married to Pharaoh's daughter. For he married her during the 4th year of his reign. Corresponding to this, the decree was promulgated on the kingdom of the house of David to be divided. The kingdom should have been restored in the 16th year of Asa's reign, because that was 36 years later. But he sinned. Asa sinned by sending a bribe to the king of Aram, and did not depend on the most holy, blessed be he. This is the meaning of that which is stated in Chronicles 2. In the 36th year of Asa's reign, Baasha built the high place. So Rashi here just explains what I told you before. Let's go to number 10. Therefore escaped. When the prophet said, Ben-Hadad escaped out of your hand, how does Rashi explain? Source 10, you did not prevail against them. Why not? Because you did not trust in the Holy One, blessed be he. For had you trusted in the Holy One, blessed be he, when the king of Israel and the king of Aram made a treaty against you, as you trusted in him when the Cushites attacked you, they would not have escaped from your hand. And you would have defeated them all, and you would not have lost your money, all that money that he gave from the temple, which you gave him in order that he abrogate his treaty with Baasha. Now that you did not trust in the Holy One, blessed be he, you lost your money, and the king of Aram escaped from your hand. Number 11, the Ralbag. The 14th lesson is to inform that it is not fitting for a person to put his faith in his own power, but it is proper to put one's faith in God. All the more so when he already found that he was helped by the Almighty. Matidyahu already was helped by Hashem, all these miracles. Asa was already helped by Hashem. He already experienced miracles. What is he running to people for? Why doesn't he just keep his faith with Hashem? Not easy to do, but for this reason you find that Asa was punished. He put his trust in his own power, means his political maneuvering. When he sent to Ben-Hadad silver and gold to break his alliance with Baasha, the king of Israel, so he would depart from him, as recounted in Chronicles. For this reason, it appears that he got sick in his legs, as we explained. Now, Asa has a son, Yehoshaphat. Yehoshaphat was a good king. Let's read number 12. We're talking about Yehoshaphat. And he walked in the way of Asa his father, and turned not aside from it, doing that which was right in the eyes of the Lord. So here, he's saying Yehoshaphat did the right thing by following Asa. Right? So what's going on? Rashi explains the next page. And he went in the way of his father Asa. From which way did he not turn away? From doing the good and upright way of his father he did not turn away. But from the bad ways of Asa, his father, he did turn away. As it is written, and Asa brought forth silver and gold. And that was the bribe money. But Yehoshaphat did not do so, but trusted all his life in the Holy One, blessed be he.
We have nothing left.
When you don't have anything, it's easy to rely on Hashem. And when Yehuda HaMaccabi had nothing, it was easy to rely on Hashem, but you had nothing to rely on. You're going out to fight, you only have Hashem. So it was a faith that was flawed to some extent, because as soon as he had the opportunity to go to Rome, he figured, okay, let's make an alliance with Rome. And then the protection that Hashem was giving him left him. Having faith is very difficult. And there are people out there that could say they could have faith on a national level, but if they don't have faith on a personal level, then they don't really have faith. And that's a hard thing to have. You have to develop it, have faith in God. especially all the miracles that Hashem has done for us in our wars. It's proof that Hashem is with us and helping us, and therefore we don't have to be afraid. We need to just rely on Hashem and not rely on the Goyim. When we rely on the Goyim, it's a problem. So last night, after Trump made his announcement, a lot of people were very, very happy. And what happened in the days of Shlomo was something similar. Because when Shlomo inaugurated the Beit HaMikdash, it happened to be the same time that he married Bat Paro. And it says, Chazal tell us, that the celebrations over his marriage for Bat Paro were greater than the inauguration of the temple. They were so happy, the Jewish people at the time, finally we got a world power on our side. You know? And Chazal tells us that was the beginning of the destruction of the temple. That was the beginning. Because that whole attitude of political alliances, instead of relying on a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's wrong. And that's why in the end of days, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to arrange, it says in Zechariah 14, where all the nations will come against Israel, against Yerushalayim for battle. Why? Even America, even though they just recognize you, they will also, because Hashem needs to show the Jewish people that they only can rely on Him. And as long as there's one country out there that they have an alliance with, they'll say, because of that country we were saved. Right. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to teach the Jewish people this important lesson. And anyway, let's keep moving. We're on source 14. We're trying to think of other examples of lack of faith. Chizkiyahu was a great man. Chizkiyahu could have been the Mashiach, but he made some mistakes. Our rabbis taught King Chizkiyahu did 6 things. Of 3 of them, the rabbis approved. Of 3, they did not approve. Of 3 they did not approve, he cut off the gold doors of the temple and he sent it to the king of Assyria, and they did not approve of it. Chizkiyahu, he was a very good king. Sancherib from the north came in, conquered the entire northern kingdom, and exiled them. Sancherib, with his 185,000 troops, surround the old city to destroy it. Chizkiyahu, what does he do? He takes the golden doors of the temple and he figures he's got nothing to lose. Maybe he could bribe Sancherib to leave him alone. He sends the gold out to Sancherib. Sancherib takes the gold and says, no deal. In Chizkiyahu's camp, there were 2 groups. That's those that side with Chizkiyahu, they were the minority. The prophet comes and tells Chizkiyahu, don't surrender. The minority side with Chizkiyahu. The majority side with Shevna, says, we'll surrender, because otherwise it's suicide. Chizkiyahu says, no, we don't surrender. He was the king. Shevna tried to surrender. He was killed. Another story. But anyway, what happened on Seder night? HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent an angel, killed all 185,000 troops of Sancherib in one night. He could have been Mashiach, but he blew it. He should have had faith in Hashem. What did he send the gold doors out there, right? He was criticized for that, and he was not Mashiach. So the Mashiach, when he comes, will have to not act like this. We're going to have a wonderful leader coming up who has tremendous faith in Hashem and doesn't fall for this. 15. God said to Moses, how long shall this nation continue to provoke me? How long will they not believe in me despite all the miracles that I have done among them? That was after the sin of the spies. The Jewish people refused to go into Eretz Yisrael. So God says, what? All the miracles I did for them, why don't they believe me? 10 plagues in Egypt, the Yam Suf. 16, Rashi. After all the signs, after all the miracles I performed for them, they should have believed that I am capable of fulfilling my promises. 17. And the name of the place was called Massa and Meribah because of the striving of the children of Israel and because they tried the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? As soon as they said, is a God here or not? So what happens? Then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. Next page, Rashi. Rashi explains, why is one verse next to the other verse? Amalek came, God juxtaposed this section to this verse. Is the Lord in our midst or not? Implying, I am always among you. I am always prepared for all your necessities. But you say, is the Lord in our midst or not? By your life, the dog will come and bite you, and you will cry out to me, and then you will know where I am. This can be compared to a man who mounted his son on his shoulders and sent out on the road. Whenever his son saw something, he would say, Father, take that thing and give it to me. And the father would give it to him. They met a man, and the son said to him, have you seen my father? So his father said to him, you don't know where I am? He threw his son down off him, and a dog came and bit him. This symbolizes what happens when the Jewish people, they don't think God is there, so then God needs to create some kind of scenario, in the end, save them, so they say, oh yeah, God saved me again. And so the idea here is that perhaps Yehuda HaMaccabi made this disastrous mistake of going to Rome, putting his faith in Rome. After all the miracles that happened to him, it in a certain way nullified all his prayers and everything he did before. Believe me, he was a great man. Obviously, he was a very great man and a tremendous faith in Hashem, but he had this flaw, which unfortunately, from then on, it was downhill for the Jews. The Hellenists got in control, and they started killing a lot of the religious Jews, and they had a very hard time after that. If we do what Hashem says, and we pray to Hashem, then Hashem will be with us. We have already a history of miracles, so we have really nothing to be worried about if we follow Hashem. When we don't follow Hashem, you can start getting worried. The Gemara asks, why did Rome become so successful over the Greeks? And the answer is because they made this treaty with the Jewish people. Even though Rome did not help the Jewish people, the very fact that they say, we are on the Jews' side, gives them zchut, merit, where the Greeks did not have that merit, and that's why Rome became so successful.